Looks like we are live with another episode of the Manny Wolf Show. Thank you guys so much for what has proven to be crazy support for this thing so far. Today I have with me a good friend of mine from, God, back when I first started in this space. I think Josh and I met each other, has it been 5 years now?
Oh yeah, probably
years,
around
maybe?
there.
Yeah, 5 or 6. And I'm just looking down to set a couple of things on my phone so that I'm sharing this out to the right places. So just
Sure.
give me a second. There we go. Okay, it is now shared everywhere. We are hot and cooking with gas, man. Josh, before I even like launch into how fascinating I find your life.
Me too.
Yeah, I just publicly want to say, man, it's good to see you again. It really is. You and I, we had some really, really good talks and connections way back when at least I was still trying to figure things out. You know,
Yeah, we did.
like, yeah, I feel like you're kind of one of my early boys. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
As far as this space goes.
And same with me. Like, that was a period in my life where I was still trying to get my shit together and figure out what worked and what didn't, and how to deal with people and stuff. And so it's those times that you always remember. Absolutely.
And so here's a blast from the past. That was back during your black tie webinars days.
That's right.
That's
Black
right.
Tie Webinar Labs.
Black tie webinar labs. Yeah. And I remember I was so naive about funnels and lead gen and all that stuff. And we were going to collaborate on something. And you were taking me through your webinar process. And I just remember looking at it and going, Jesus, this is so much fucking work.
I thought I was just going to hop on and let money roll in.
Yeah, no, I really did, man. Because I mean, when I first came into the space, the loudest message was build a funnel, change your life. .com secrets had just come out. Everybody was hacking funnels and all this stuff. And for better or for worse, I remember talking to my wife and going, one of these days I'm going to have to build a funnel and I literally was saying, that's obviously how you do it.
Yeah. Well, and that's an okay thing. A lot of people, you don't realize how much work goes into something until you start to create them a couple of times and you see what works and what doesn't. The initial creation usually is overwhelming just because of the sheer volume of stuff that you've got to take care of. But then the harder part is to take what you've just done and then spend even more time refining it. That's the part where either, people either do it or they don't. And if they don't, they're just like, oh, screw this, I'll just completely switch gears sort of thing.
Yeah. I think that's where the dramatic fall off happens.
Yeah.
Right. And this is interesting. I guess it's because so many of my friends are in the entrepreneurial space. I wind up talking about this a lot with people. And it's the tendency to kind of not have, I don't know if it's a combination of discipline, belief in yourself, to iterate, to follow through, to stay on it when it doesn't yield big bucks right away.
Yeah. Well, I think, like, of course, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
I wish I had known that 5 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, but if it's honestly like, the more that you do stuff, the more that you create things, the more that you see how the market reacts to the stuff that you create, the more that you realize how much work it is and whether or not, like, as you mature, as you've done and as I've done since like 5 years from now, for me, it's no longer, can I do something, right? Yeah. I've answered that question to myself. I'm satisfied, like I can do it. Now it's a question of, should I, And
that's a good point. Yeah.
And so I'm a lot more discerning with how I spend my time and what projects I spend my time on. And that's where I feel the more important skill is.
Yeah. It's sort of like going from, speech 101 to advanced stage tactics or something. It's an iteration into the maturity of the process. Yeah. Just quickly, let me just say publicly, of the things that I know about that you've done in your life, because I want people to understand why I chose to title this talk "Lessons from the World's Most Interesting Man in the World." You have worked on is it longboats or tall ships? What's it called?
Tall ships.
You've worked on tall ships. You've created Black Tie Webinar Labs. You're currently touring the United States on is it a 1974 BMW motorcycle?
Close, 71, and it's honestly 71. It's right over there. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're literally that guy who's like, you're on the road again, like Jack Kerouac.
Yeah.
You hold on, I'm not done with you yet. Okay. You have built out a comprehensive funnel mapping software. You have lived on a sailboat that you yourself either restored or at least maintain.
Yep.
You're a musician. Yeah. You're a good writer. I mean, just in the stuff that you write on social media.
Thanks, man.
You have this. I'm not glad handing you here, and I want people to know that. It's just really fascinating to watch how sort of multifaceted your skill sets are. You have an incredible eye for photography that just kills me. You do it on a phone. And it looks
seriously, like just right on this thing for the most part.
Yeah. And I'm reasonably sure that you were an engineer, weren't you?
Yeah, for the entertainment industry. So for like we designed things for like Justin Timberlake and Cirque du Soleil, and I spent some time in Macau, created some things in Vegas, and like just
That's wild.
Yeah. Well,
do you get that?
It's all part of it, man. It's like just another chapter of a crazy ass life. But all of these things, it's funny that we're talking about this because I just was interviewing a really cool person, Amber Browning Coyle, and she was talking about, you know, all of these different experiences that you have in your life and how they all come together, make you so well-rounded, and they all feed on one another. So as you continue to evolve in life, right, you get these influences from all your different experiences, and that just makes you better at what you're focusing your time on at the present moment.
That is so true. Now, at various times in my life, I was on the path to committing my life to music, to committing my life to martial arts, to committing my life to art, to committing my life to theater, to committing my life to food service and restaurant work. You know, these were all things that I was going to take very seriously. And it's interesting that it wasn't that I got to a certain point and went, nah. It was that circumstances just changed underneath my feet in a way. And so, especially because in my case, I was someone who never really implemented sort of long-term responsibility as a way of approaching life. I was very reckless, and you know a little bit about my sordid history.
Right.
But it's exactly like you say. I sort of went through a small death with each of those things when I couldn't give myself over to them completely, you know. And there was this feeling of, first of all, well, if I pick one, the others will suffer, which kept me in stasis, like a bad stasis for a while. And then there was like sort of allowing a little death to happen. It's like, oh, I'm not going to be opening my own restaurant, at least so far as I can see. I'm not going to be a working musician so far. You know what I mean? But they all now inform in ways that are very hard to pinpoint, but that I can see everything I do. So I just love that you guys were talking about that. It's sort of I think you would be uniquely qualified to talk about this. We just sort of, we fold those experiences into who we become.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah. So if you had to say you have one main focus right now, what would you say that is? Well, and if not, tell us, tell us if you got multiple, that's okay.
Yeah. No, I would say honestly on a most immediate level, finding good internet on the road. That's, you know, like, in fact, I have one of these things. I don't know if people have ever seen what those Solus X Skyroam hotspots that work all over the world.
Yeah, a hotspot.
But honestly, like, being able to have this sort of location independent lifestyle, but at the same time, that comes with a lot of consequences and things that you have to deal with that most people don't have to worry about. You know, if you're just at home, you just crack open the laptop and you take internet for granted, right?
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So it's those types of things that have occupied the majority of my headspace in the immediate.
Yeah.
But as far as like an overarching goal, I'm working on a new, well, it's not new for me, it'll be new for the world, a concept that I've been honing for the last almost 2 years now, all about accountability, and trying to, the way that I've been able to do kind of what I've done has been that I've just not beaten myself up if I wasn't able to make a whole lot of progress in these massive spurts, like, you know, these sprints. Instead, I tried to just pace myself. So for instance, you know, in addition to doing all this online work, I'm developing software, I'm having to do motorcycle maintenance all the time, get the bike ready, things like that. I've also been learning how to speak Ukrainian for the last like 5 months.
Of course,
yeah, right, because that's what you do. And
as one does, yes.
and honestly, the way that I do it is for an hour a day, 4 times a week, with somebody over in Kiev. But that consistency, right? Now, you know, I can understand and write and speak Ukrainian, like, you know, and that's just one example. That takes an hour a day for me. And so I have maybe 4 or 5 of those things that I try to fit into every day. And it's amazing how fast you progress when you do it that way.
Yeah. You know, there's something in what you just said that I think can be sort of really taken at a universal level. There's a strong, rigid narrative around what productivity needs to look like. And I know for me, it has left me feeling alienated. You know, in fact, it's funny, just over the last few days, my journaling has been around the question of not, you know, what's the goal I'm after? What am I trying to create? It's a shift. Who do I need to become in order to create the things and get the things that I'm after? Right. It's a shift in concept. But one of the things that when I write that question out and then I start to answer it each morning, one of the things that keeps coming up is, in some form or another, you can't hold yourself to that sort of standard and that narrative that you see for what productivity looks like, for what prolific production looks like.
Yeah, because who knows where you gleaned that from, right?
Right.
Like, who knows? You could have just made it up, right? Or taken bits and pieces of it, and you know, and put it together into some semblance of an idea of productivity that in no way, shape, or form is achievable. So I think you're right in a sense that, you know, give yourself a little bit of slack, and honestly, just try to move the ball forward a yard every day and see where that gets you.
So do you think that kind of being able to let go of some packaged or cookie cutter or conventional model of what life looks like has been influential in you sort of at least getting good at, if not mastering, all the unique things that you've done?
I do. Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because I, you know, spend time thinking about this, and for some reason, somewhere back in my childhood, I rejected the idea that I was going to go along with everyone else.
Yeah.
And I don't know what point in my life I started to actively pursue things that were the opposite of what everybody did.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure to this day like where that really came from,
Yeah.
but I can tell you that the results that have yielded from that type of behavior
Yeah.
have always been they've served me well, like in various things. I'm just find that now, through living that more unconventional idea of what it is to be productive and what it is to be a success, quote unquote,
Yeah.
that's left me with a really healthy interest of the fringes of life. And that's where I have found the majority of my interests have come. And honestly, pursuing those have led down these like incredible pathways that never would have had otherwise. So so I do think it stems from that.
Yeah. And it's really cool to hear you say that, because you have the sort of the Jack Kerouac pedigree that backs this up. This isn't just a guy sitting in his armchair philosophizing about the fringes of life. You know what I mean?
Right.
You've done some really interesting and sort of off the beaten trail stuff. I remember us having a conversation, I'm going to guess it was about 4 years ago, on the phone, and you're like, man, I'm thinking about this whole, doing this whole like running my business from my phone thing. You remember that call?
I remember talking to you about it.
Yeah. And you're like, I just don't know, like, like how do I get the book, or not how do I get the book out there? I'm jumping ahead, but you're like, I feel like I need more notoriety or something to do this. I think that's what you said. And I was saying, what if you just start documenting a little bit of every day, because like, dude, you're living on a sailboat, you're doing all this stuff, I feel like there's a book in there for sure.
Yeah. A couple of them, a whole volume series.
At this point. Yeah, for sure. But I guess where I was going with that was, sometimes we can't see the forest for the trees in our own experience.
Sure.
You know what I mean? It's because we're living it.
Yeah, and I think that I lose sight of the fact that this type of life and the things that I do that to me are daily and almost desensitized at this point, that I lose sight of the fact that they might be interesting to other people.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's going through the experience of writing my own book. And I had no idea, one word to the next, whether my book was worth two shits. I had to read it nightly to my wife to get any feedback and perspective on it. And so it was this beautiful little ritual, but going through that, it was like, oh, okay, I get it. Like, you know what I mean? It really helped me see this thing that I took for granted is not normal.
Yeah, totally. And you have to ask yourself, I mean, how many people is it going to take to tell you that you've got something good going on, that you're going to start to believe it, right? It's a good question that people should ask themselves. How many people is it really going to take? And what's your number? Everybody's got a number. What's your number? So I can see that. And I feel like I'll probably be that way with the book that I write too, until I get comfortable with the fact that, for me anyway, it's always about, I don't want to sound vain, like with the book. That's what I always worry about. I want to try and write these experiences in a way that people learn something from them or get something out of them. And I'm always cognizant about that. I hate, I hate talking about me just for like me's sake kind of thing.
Well, then this interview must be sucking.
Keep going.
I got what you need. Here's, I've coached and supported and been a sort of not a counselor, but just giving people feedback and guidance on their book writing process a lot. And here's what I can tell you, simply put: make sure you don't ever position yourself as the hero or the victim when you tell the story. And that keeps you in the sweet spot, right? You want to hold yourself on the same level as every other player in the story. So you're never looking for sympathy, and you're never like, check this shit out.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah. I can see that.
Yeah. Especially if it's like if it's a life story, you know, if it's lately
like
I'm
an
drawing
autobiography kind of
Thank
thing.
you. A memoir. That's the word I was looking for. I have been drawing blanks on the most common words lately. I don't know what's going on, man. I blame it on coronavirus. I do. Yeah, that's how it's showing up for me. Those are my symptoms. This is how I'm experiencing it. But yeah, so it's just sort of unflinching, right?
Yeah.
It's sort of the approach is like, I'm just going to tell the truth to the best of my ability.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, to go back to like your comment about the sailboat and living on that type of thing. The other portion of life that I feel has contributed to the way that I am and the things that I'm doing. And the sailboat's a really good like analogy for this, because when you live on a boat like that, and I'm not tied to the dock, I'm moored out in the middle of the Hudson River. So I actually have to take a small boat from land, right, and motor to the larger boat and tie it up. And then that's how I get on and off. Well, when you live on a boat that way, everything is constantly moving. Everything is constantly dynamic. Staying still and staying stagnant is not just it's not just a fear. It's like literally not possible. And so that sense of constantly moving, constantly having to adapt, you know, you're the motion of the boat, certainly, and weather, you're so much more affected by weather at that point. So you always have to keep an eye. All of those, that like keeps you sharp in a way. And and that translates to all these other areas of life, you know, like the Ukrainian, like doing all the marketing and the software development. I've never found that I've stayed stagnant with something, mainly because I'm so used to constantly having to adapt. And so I think that the more that people that are listening to this, if you're getting anything out of this ramble that I've put myself on, it's really just that that stay moving, stay moving, because you know if you stop, you die.
That's such an apropos and timely analogy for me. When you work with other people, do you find that sort of in rhythms, different themes tend to present themselves over and over again?
Yeah. You mean as
Do you know
far
what I
as
mean by
like
that?
how as far as like how they're acting, or my observations of them?
So I coach people, as I assume you probably do, at least somewhat. I know you work on other things, but when you coach people, my experience has been that like whether or not someone is able to get into action comes up with multiple coaching clients across, let's say, as an example, 2 or 3 months. It's the front and center issue. And then another issue will come up, and it'll just sort of surreptitiously show up in all these different unrelated people. And I take that as, you know, when we coach people, we learn more than they do if it's done right. It's a funny business, because you're getting paid very well to learn more than you teach. You know, it's a weird
Not
thing.
too many professions like that.
Not too many. And so for me right now, the whole idea of staying in action is front and center. So I find this interesting that you said that. Action beats emotion every time. Action is the way to get the stalemates moving. It's the only way to get through the inertia. So what do you find that you're ever in a space where it's a little hard to get into action? Or is that just sort of, tell me about that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. I think everybody does. I do. I certainly do. You know, when things don't play out the way that I sort of visualized how they would, if honestly, like the latest sort of thing is that you just get tired. Like you get really tired of trying and pushing what seemingly feels like you're going upriver. And that slows you to a stop, and you are so tempted to just you know, stop swimming and let the river take you. And you just have to fight through that. There, you know, the hard work. I'm trying to remember who quoted this. I think it was like Dick Cheney or something like that. But I mean, he was saying, you know, hard work is the work that you do after the hard work that you've already done. And I think that was a really good way to think about it. You know, once you think you've worked hard and then you have more work to do, that's actually, you know, the hard work. That's the stuff that will distinguish you from the rest of the pack. And I feel that way a lot. But the more that you move, the more that you put yourself into a routine where you're constantly working, you give yourself boundaries, you challenge yourself. Whenever I take on a new project, I give myself what I kind of like break out a time estimate of how long I think it's going to take. And then I'll cut that in half and I'll say, all right, now I have that much time to get this done. And that forces me to think creatively. It forces me to act on things and not to sit there and wonder, oh, do I have the right words for my tagline or, you know, whatever, you know. I act because that action is really what's going to give me the feedback that I need to make something successful.
Yeah. One of the foremen that I used to have working for me when I was still doing construction used to love to say, the reward for hard work well done is more hard work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think there's a truth to that, you know. I think
but the satisfaction of doing hard work but doing a job well, right, is certainly present. You know, it's not like work for work's sake. It's like the fact that you feel damn proud when you create something that was hard and you've produced it and it's worked, and you can step back and just feel this immense satisfaction on what you've done.
Absolutely. Where do you prefer? Which type of hard work do you prefer? The hard work that must go along with working on a ship, or the hard work that comes to, that is required to conceptualize and build like a software platform?
Oh man. Yeah. Well, when I was younger, it would have been the tall ship stuff. And the physical labor of it all, right? Because that physical labor, I mean, you're out at sea for days and days, and it is a very, very physical job. These are all, if people are listening and they don't know what a tall ship is, it's a traditionally rigged sailboat, and they range from 80 feet to 250 feet, and they look like pirate ships, and so they've got big, large crews, and we sleep in hammocks sometimes, and you climb up aloft and into the rigging, and you deal with the sails and stuff. So it's very physical. Everything's raised by hand. We're not talking like barefoot cruises in the BVI's kind of thing, Mai Tais on the sun deck kind of stuff. It's very, very rigorous. But along with that, you just feel lean, and two, you get to experience things that are just unexperienceable by anyone else. And those types of memories I'll always have and I'll always cherish. So I really loved that kind of work. But as you get older, anybody who's smart, in my opinion, or cognizant or self-aware, knows that they're not going to be able to keep that level up forever. And they need to start like getting paid from using their head and not necessarily their muscle.
Yeah, it was a hard switch to make for me too. One of the things I still carry with me, the memory acutely, like in my body, of 14-hour days painting houses. Right? I didn't do as many of those as people might like to brag about, but I've done it, and it's indescribably hard work. After about the 10th hour, everything just gets harder,
Yeah, I mean, even being up on that ladder and stuff. Yeah,
ladders are the worst, man, as I'm sure you know.
Yeah,
ladders are a devious creation of Satan to bedevil the days of man. They are fucking evil.
Yep.
But like switching to the mind work was hard in the sense that if you get really good at I assume most kinds of like sophisticated physical skills, it becomes very hard to transition out of that, right? Because you inevitably hit this point where you look back and you go, I can't make half of what I'm making now doing anything else that I can think of, And yet it's getting a little harder to get up in the morning. it's taken a little longer each day before the stiffness goes away. You start to feel it.
Oh yeah. And then you get to a point where there's like a point of no return.
Yeah.
In your mind, you say to yourself, well, I'm totally fucked now because I can't do anything else. What am I going to do? Start over at like 45 years old kind of thing, and start from scratch? I can't do that. And I think that that's wrong on two counts, in a sense that, one, you're never too old to start over, but two, that's not a real objection, right? That's certainly like a manufactured objection in your head, but it's just a question of letting your ego like back off for a little bit and then just progressing. I can honestly say that from some serious experience, because after all of this tall ship stuff, I spent years. I was like, 8 years or so working in this industry, and I gave it all up. And then I was like, you know what? I've always wanted to be an engineer. I've always had that kind of mindset. What do I need to do to make this happen? I majored in Spanish at Denison University. So like, how in the world is a Spanish major going to go into engineering? Right. And so, but I found a program at Boston University, make a long story short, but I had to teach myself trigonometry, and then take a test to get into a calculus class, of which I then had to teach myself calculus. And this was just to apply for this program. And here I am at like 29 at the time, thinking, dude, I am way too old to be starting over in school. Like, I'm going to be sitting in a classroom with all of these like 18-year-old kids, and I'm just going to feel embarrassed. I'm going to be the older guy. Well, I'll tell you what actually happened was that, yes, I sat in those classrooms with these 18-year-olds, and I completely fucked the curve up for them grading wise, right? Because I was there with purpose, and they were there not knowing what the hell they wanted to do with their life. And that made all of the difference when it came to performance.
I had the exact same situation when I went back to school. I left school. I had to give a presentation to my principal in high school to tell him why I was dropping out. So I gave him a little presentation, gave him my business plan, what I was going to do, and didn't come back in 11th grade. And so when I went back to college, it was just like, what the hell? But you're right about the purpose. The thing that I really want to kind of explore, though, is first I want to say, you taught yourself, did you say calculus?
Yeah, I used.
You're not comforting anyone listening to this. You understand that, right?
It's not as hard. Like, I was never a math person when I was growing up. I never really considered myself one, but very much like learning a language, you just have to give yourself a little bit of time to understand it. But once you break over this point where you're just like, holy crap, like, I get this now, then all of the doors open up. And calculus isn't as daunting as you would imagine it is. It's not even close. It's just your impression of calculus. Sure. That's the scary part.
I had a similar experience with algebra. I ramped up to it and failed twice. Finally got a good professor who was really kind of one of those like, stand and deliver professors. And through that, I actually developed a fascination and a love for the puzzle and the logic side of it. I didn't pursue it past, getting through it because it was a requirement, but I know what you mean.
Yeah.
I know what you mean.
And there's
the word calculus is terrifying.
Yeah. Well, it is, but you're right in the sense that there really are like good teachers and then not so good teachers. A lot of some of the best people to explain concepts like that I found were online, like on YouTube videos. These guys that were professors at a community college somewhere in the middle of Minnesota, and they not only knew all of the concepts, but they also understood the psychology of teaching. And man, it would just click, So so I get that.
I think that the one thing that we're sort of illustrating here is the power of what I might call curiosity. I won't even call it intellectual curiosity, although I do think that you're one of the more intellectually curious people I know, which is really, that is me glad handing you. That is a from me, that's a big compliment, because I'm always lamenting the lack of curiosity and intellectual curiosity.
Thanks,
As we
man.
sort of come to get to the hour here, and I want to be respectful of your time, can you talk a little bit about where you suspect that curiosity might have come from?
Yeah. That's a good question. If I think back really far back, that curiosity, I think, stems from a need to understand how things work.
Mm-hmm.
But that really doesn't, I don't think that helps people listening at all, because it sounds like you either have it or you don't. And I think that that's wrong.
Yeah.
I think that my cousin, Matt Sprosty, he's a screenwriter, and he once told me this quote that I think was amazing. He's like, only boring people are boring. And if to be interesting, you need to be interested, right? So that interest, I think, is cultivated the more that you go out and experience new things. Like, I think it's impossible for anybody listening right now to go get dropped into the middle of Japan somewhere and not be interested or curious with why people are doing what they're doing, and and for how long, and what's the meaning behind it and stuff. I think that it's not that people necessarily aren't curious, it's that they don't put themselves into an opportunity of experiencing new things enough, right? That's where I think the difference is. So for me, because I dropped myself into all these different weird experiences, the curiosity came naturally.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I feel like an interesting thing happened. There's that play, An Interesting Thing Happened on the Way to the Theater, or whatever it's called. An interesting thing happened on our way to utopia as a species, right? We still have all these drives in us that were relevant back when we lived in the tall grass and might encounter big cats and things like that, right? But we've built up around ourselves such a profoundly cushioned society. I mean, granted, this virus is teaching us something, but we won't get caught napping on something like this again after this happens. You know what I mean? Like, I promise you one thing about humans: we ain't getting, fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice,
right?
But we've built up societies around ourselves that are so insulatory and so cushioning and so overabundant that it's like, it reminds me of something that's like the trajectory is moving towards Aldous Huxley and Brave New World, right? Where you can just plug into infinite pleasure to the point where you don't even realize it, but you're in the Matrix.
Yeah, that's true.
And one of the things that I think is a side effect of that, I think it was Earl Nightingale who I first heard say, we find in this modern age the man who never has to get out of first or second gear in order to succeed. I think what you're talking about, and certainly what I've known of what you've done, is you have put yourself in situations that require you to get well out of second gear.
Totally.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Extremely out of your comfort zone. We're talking, stuff, the most embarrassing things. I've got so many embarrassing stories of things, but you learn to rely on yourself. You learn to be self-reliant in those kinds of situations. And you can't help but just naturally absorb, as a human being, all of these experiences and all of these emotions, to see the brighter side of the world. And that sticks with you,
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great place to put a tack in it, my friend. I want to thank you so much for your time, Josh. I was very excited to catch up with you again. It's only been a few messages here and there over the last few years, but like many other people, I'm definitely watching what you're up to and always kind of shaking my head and going, damn, man. He's living the dream.
Yeah, man, no, this was fantastic. I really appreciate you having me on. I really enjoyed the conversation, and honestly, if people were curious and want to follow me, Saltwater CEO is the Instagram account. So if they want to follow the trip, check it out there.
Is that where you like to send people? Saltwater CEO on Instagram?
Yeah, that's the best, just because it's a bunch of cool pictures and stuff that I feel like it's the easiest to get the gist.
Perfect. All right, my friend, I look forward to more cool stuff from you in the future, and I'm pretty sure you won't disappoint, man.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
And last thing, before you get to California, give me heads up.
Oh, I will.
Okay, brother. All right, man.
See ya.
Bye.